Hey, welcome back. So in this tutorial, we're going to take a look at lighting. Now, you may not want everything that I'm going to show you in this. I'm going to try to cover quite a bit, but not everything because there's an awful lot to lighting and post-processing and all that stuff to get your game ready. But we're going to go over some stuff that would help your game look better, help you control the lighting in our current Rollerball game that may be useful to you before we get ready to build out the game itself. So anything that I do cover, I will be having chapters, like I always do, down at the bottom here, underneath in the description, so that you can find the different chapters and go directly to what it is you want. Okay, but we are going to take a look at directional lighting, exponential height fog. We'll talk a little bit about post-processing volumes, the sky atmosphere, and maybe some volumetric cloud. Take a look at some of this stuff. All right, so we'll kind of run through some of that, and light mass importance. We'll also throw a light mass importance in there and talk about that as well. Okay, so in the past I've been kind of demonstrating it in the game that I have, and then jumping into kind of a demo game. So I'm going to go ahead and just stay in the actual game that I have here and kind of demo that. But before we jump into that, let's go ahead and talk about being able to catch up here in Putting on the Fritz 3D Visualization, my YouTube channel. Check that out, subscribe, and like anything that you watch that you actually like. All right, so let's go ahead and jump on over and take a look at what we're talking about here. So here in the game, this is kind of my first level. I have this floating temple out in this ravine. It's towards the end of the challenge. There's this dark cave that you'll travel through. So there's a couple different light things going on here, all right? And of course, the starting point all the way up here is also in the light. And I kind of ran around this, and I'm going to talk about changing the light coloring and kind of the feeling of the light, the intensity, things like that, to kind of give your game a distinct feel of how you want it. Now, one of the things I did do is I played around with and I left the light position, okay? So that's kind of, I think, where we're going to go ahead and start. We're going to go ahead and talk about setting up our directional light. This is right up here at the top. Now, if you don't already have them in your game, and these are things that you might need, directional lighting is sort of like your sunlight. And if you're down inside of a cave or something like that, you're probably not going to need it. It's not going to be useful to you because you're not going to see it. So that would be focused on your individual point lights and other types of lighting that you've set up to give your player the ability to see what's happening in that dark area. And some of the other things I'm going to talk about later, like the post-processing volume, light mass importance, those are things that you'd be interested in, but directional lighting, exponential height fog may not be something you're interested in. You would probably be interested in post-processing volume. We'll go over that. And some other things that have to do with the actual outdoor skylight you probably won't be interested in. So you can skip ahead into that section of the video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back out here because I'm trying to set up a focus as my player gets to the end of the game, because that very front piece was very limited out in the light. The rest of this is in the dark. But then we get out here, I want to set up a focus of how my player is going to see the sun as they come right here, okay? So in Unreal Engine 5, they've made it easy. If you hold down Control L, you'll get this little gizmo that pops up right down over here, right here, okay? So if you hold down Control L and then move your mouse around, you'll see that you can control the direction that the sun's coming from, and you see that little kind of arrow looking thing that's moving with me as I move my mouse around. All right? So what I want to do is I want to put my sun so that it's like right back here, and it's just above that tree as my player comes out. And it's kind of hard to see. It's right here, and it's because of the way all of the defaults are set up with everything that I have in here right now. So my directional lighting, we'll go ahead and talk about how some of this stuff is first brought in. So directional lighting is probably defaulted if you set it up and are using one that already had a light system set up into the game area. If you don't have it, you can go to Place Actors and go in here, and if you just type in light, you'll see that all kinds of different lights are available. This is the directional light that I'm talking about right here. You can just click and drag it in, and I will usually set that back to 0, 0, and for some reason it's moved over to 400, but I usually just have these all in location at 0, 0. The rotation is what we just kind of played around with, so I wouldn't set that back. And I think scale, I'm not sure why it's at 2.5. It may have been defaulted that, or it may have been moved, but it looks like I don't have a reset, so I think it's set at 2.5. All right, so that's the directional light, and that's what we're going to play with first. The other things I brought in, Exponential Height Fog. Again, if you go up here and type in fog, this will be one of the things you can drag in, and I'll show you how I'm going to use Exponential Height Fog in here. It may not be something you want. Post-processing volume, again, I set it at 0, 0, 0. If you type in post up here in your place actors, it'll be something that comes in. We also want Lightmass importance volume, and you're going to drag that and put that in as well. I set all these again back at 0. Okay, and sky atmosphere is something that we'll talk about. You may want that as well. And you may also want to add things like a skylight or volumetric clouds. Okay, and again, everything is kind of set at 0, 0, 0, sort of the origin of the game area. Because directional lighting doesn't really matter in its location or its position. What matters is its rotation. Okay, and the same with a lot of these other things as well. Now, we will make adjustments to post-processing volume because, or actually light mass importance, because those are things that we're going to need to have in a certain area to tell the system what's going to be important for us to render. Okay, the rest of this pretty much can be left at 0, 0, 0. Okay, so now that we've kind of talked about being able to adjust the light, holding down your Control L until you get the look that you and location that you want. Okay, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the lighting itself. And also, before I jump into that, one of the things I've been meaning to talk about is setting up folders. Okay. Here, you're going to want to start putting folders together. Because I have a lot of cannons in this scene, or several cannons, I've made a folder for that. I made a game assets folder, and I've also made a game environment folder. Okay, the game environment folder is going to be things like the lighting, the post-processing, sky sphere, those type of things. A light mass importance volume should go in there as well. And then I have my player start. I usually leave that out of these folders because I often move it around. I need to get to it. I need to find it. So just having it kind of hovering out there outside the folder works out okay for me. All right. And then, of course, all the game assets. I set up folders. I put light things together or things that build an entire asset, like the castle here. All of the things that fall together to put this castle together are inside this folder. Pickups, even though pickups could be spread out throughout the map, they're individual, so I have those pickups in here, and as I add more, they'll populate that. Torches, again, a lot of torches, so put them all together. All right, so that's kind of the setup to organize your folders, to make things a little bit easier to find and to hide things when you don't need them. And also, if you do put them in a folder, the like things, for example, down here, I'm just going to talk about them real quick, and then we'll talk a little bit more about them later as we make some modifications to the scene. But these are fog emitters, and they are actually from a game asset, which we'll talk about later. But if I have them all together in a folder, I can just turn them off all at once, so I don't have to go hunting around for them individually. Because one of the things about fog emitters is as they emit like this, they're sort of these cards that have a masking system in them. So when I click on them, or I try to click on assets behind them, I'll instead constantly be clicking on these emitters. So if I hide them, then it's easier to select things around them when I'm not needing to have anything to do with the fog emitters. Okay? And then I can always turn them back on together too. All right, so that's one of the reasons for putting things together in like systems inside of folders. Okay, so let's get back to our directional lighting. I'm trying to set up a mood, like I said, and I know it's hard to see the sunlight here because of all these other things that are currently in here. But the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to play around a little bit with my light system, okay? Right now I have it kind of right here above this tree. I may adjust it once I can actually see it a little bit better. Actually, it's right up here. Okay, so one of the things I'm going to do is I want to play around with the color of the light using the temperature, and then I'm going to probably adjust the intensity of it as well. So right here, if I click on this, you'll see that it jumps to 3000, which was a number that I had been playing around with. It's usually defaulted at 6500. So I'm just going to click in there, type 3000 back in there, and it gives me this sort of a yellowish tint that I'm looking for, and you can kind of start to see my sun is right there now. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and adjust my intensity down pretty low. So I'm going to click in here and I'm going to type in 0.2. Now these are numbers that you're going to have to play around with until you get a feel for the way your scene is and the way you want it to be. Just like our last video tutorial where we talked about music and putting music into your game, background music and sound effects and things. The way the lighting is in your game gives the player a feel for the game. You can promote certain feelings in the player and in the way that they perceive your game or a room or a challenge that they're doing. Is it dark and spooky? Is the light difficult to see in, which adds complexity to that part of the game? Is it bright and cheery? So those are things that you need to think about for your game and the mood that you want to convey to the player. Okay. All right. So I've got my intensity set to 0.2, and I'm actually trying to get to a little bit more of a reddish kind of off-world type feel. So here with the light color, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go ahead and make some adjustments. So I got 255. Since I want red, and I've already kind of worked these numbers out for what I was looking for, I'm going to go with something like this, more of a little bit of a reddish kind of feel. And there's some things we're going to have to do inside of some of the other settings that we have over here that are going to help add to this as well. Okay, so now let's see here. I think that's pretty much the basics that I have intended for this setup here. Okay, so now I've kind of got this reddish feel. The fog doesn't look right, and we're going to talk about that in a minute in the emitters, and I'll tell you where you can find it. So let's go ahead and with this kind of setup, let's take a look at our sky atmosphere real quick. Okay, and the sky atmosphere is what adds that bluish tint to our sky. All right, so it's what makes it look like an Earth sky. So assuming that we're on a different kind of world, I'm going to change my atmosphere on my sky atmosphere here from this bluish color, and I'm going to go ahead and give it a little bit more of a reddish tint. You can see that kind of really changes the way the world feels a little bit. And play around with it till you get the look that you're looking for. Let's say okay. So now I have a much more of a reddish tint. That's kind of what I'm going for. And I can now see where the sun is located. So I'm going to select my directional light. I'm going to hold down Control L again. Click in the scene, hold Control L down. And now I'm going to go ahead and get that position just where I want it. Okay. And one of the things is as the player moves forward, the sun will drop down, and there is this sort of point right here in the tree where the sun will shine through right in this location here. And that's kind of a feel I was wanting to go for. So if I hit, change this to my current location, and I hit play. Now I haven't built out the lighting, and we're going to talk about that here in a second too, so it's not quite the way it's going to look. But as I move forward in the game, you can see where that sun starts to kind of peek through. And I may need to move it around just a little bit more, but that's kind of what we're looking for, is like right here. Okay, so I'm getting happy with that. That's pretty good. So let's go ahead and talk about, real quick, building out light, okay? So let me turn all this back up here. So I'm going to go up here where it says build, and I'm going to click the down arrow, and right here where it says light quality, right now I'm just in a preview because the preview will computate faster than if we do like medium, high, and production levels, of course. So it takes less processing time to do this. It's not the highest level quality, but it's good enough for you to be able to start to feel for what your lighting is going to look like. So I'm going to go ahead and then once that's done, right here where it says build lighting, I don't want to build all levels yet. I just want to build the lighting because I'm still playing around with it, trying to get the look. Okay, and depending on your system, it will take a certain amount of time to build, and it could be faster or slower. While we're waiting for this to build, I'm going to go ahead and pause, and then I'll jump right back here in a second. Okay, so now we're coming towards the end. My lighting is just about built. This is what will happen. Sometimes it'll jump right back in right away, and sometimes it'll take just another few seconds to kind of finish. Once this all goes away, you should be able to click and move around in here. You may also end up with a pop-up screen that will give you some information about the build. It checks your textures and things like that and tells you if you have issues like this. Because I didn't build these models, there's a lot of overlapping UVs, and it's not really a significant issue. It's a caution, okay? But there are no real errors that have popped up, and you can see over here on the left-hand side, there's all these different message logs, and if we had load errors, editor errors, we would see those pop up in here in the error section, build and submit errors and things like that, okay? So we just clear that out. Close it. It's not a big issue. All right, so now this is kind of how the world looks. It's a little bit more refined. It's more red. That's kind of what I'm going for. And then if I jump back over here through the fog, we can see that inside here I have some build out. It's going to be pretty dark in here, and I'll have to probably mess around with the lighting a little bit to get the look that I want, but it may or may not be an issue. And while I'm thinking of that, I'm going to go ahead and jump over here into my project settings. Remember, under Edit, Project Settings, and there's this feature called Auto Exposure. Okay, and if you type in Auto EXP, you can check to see if it's turned on or turned off in your project. By default, it should be turned on if you haven't turned it off. Now, what this does is it basically makes sure that there's enough light in the game so that the player can see and play. If you're really trying to go for a dark scene, this will probably help you out, okay? So having it turned on is probably what you want. But if it's not, you can uncheck it, kind of play around with it, build out your lighting and see what it looks like. But there will be no automatic light added in so that you as the player can see in the world that you've built. It'll all be lighting that you have put in and placed and you've controlled, so it may not work to your advantage that way. Okay. All right. So the next thing I want to do is talk about. So we did a little bit with our sky atmosphere. All I really did for the sky atmosphere was adjust the color tone to the sky. There are other things that you can come in and adjust as far as coloring. All of these things have to do with the way scattering occurs in your atmosphere. Again, absorption. So you can kind of play around with some of this stuff. You can also play around with how the height fog contributes, how much of it does to the light bounce. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff you can play in with that. Let's take a look at our skylight real quick. Skylight is another thing that gives color and light to the scene. And right here, our light color is white. If you wanted to get more intense in a direction with color, you can also play around with that here. Okay. And stay more consistent with it. Our sky sphere, that's just a mesh that is this sky sphere back in here. We can change those out. So in the next level, I'll show you real quick where I've changed out the sky sphere to be a different style sky, but I'm not going to really get into the mechanics of how to do that. The sky sphere I use is actually available in the marketplace, and there's some instructions on how to use that with it when you download it. Okay, so let's take a look at post-processing volume. Now, post-processing volume is just as it sounds. That's the way that the camera is filming in this scene. So think of the player camera, right? It's the camera that allows the player to be able to see where they're going and playing. There are a lot of different things you can do. They're under these titles like lens, and so lens has things like bloom. So you know that you can use a standard method bloom if you want. You can adjust the intensity, how much bloom there's going to be. So you can see if you take a look at the sun up there as I mess around with this, it causes this sort of a expansion, kind of a little circle around it. That's the bloom of the light. If I take a look at other lighting, you'll start to see some of the blooming around it. Now these lights already have sort of an actual bloom that's added into them, so you don't have to worry about the bloom for that. You can play around with threshold, a whole bunch of different things. Here, set your bloom. I'm going to turn this off. Turn off bloom. Another thing that you can play with, of course, all of these, but lens flare is another thing that's used quite a bit. And if I turn on lens flare, you'll see that it's from the angle of the sun or from a light source, you'll get this kind of reflectiveness like you're using a glass lens on a camera. And you'll get this sort of effect here, and you can also play around with how intense it is, how light it is, and things like that. So you can kind of get the feel for what you want. You can even adjust the tint color. Right now this is kind of like a white light, but since we're in a kind of a reddish world, we can change that tint if we wanted to. It's not going to totally go red, but it'll get more of a tinge towards it. All right, I'm going to turn that off. I'm not going to use that either. Tons of other stuff here. You can play around with light grading, color grading, depth of fields. You can use lumen global illumination, which I do have turned on here. I've turned it on. Usually it's defaulted off, I believe. If it's on, then I stand corrected, but I believe this is a default off. I may have turned it on at some point. Lumen is that new system in Unreal Engine 5 that allows for the way that light is controlled in the system, and you also need to turn on generate mesh distance field. So that again would be back here in your project settings. Okay, and generate mesh distance field right here. Check to make sure that it's turned on if you're wanting to use that. Now it depends on your system. Some of these may not work the way you want them to, based off of the way your system's set up. All right, so as I go through here, there's the way that reflections are handled. Now I don't have a lot of surfaces that are reflective in this, so like glass or water, those type of things. So that's not really something I'm going to use for the scenes I have here, for the levels in this game. But tons of other things. You can play with film graininess, so you can make it look more like a like it's an older film. And if I let's see here, find some place and turn this up a little bit, you'll see that gets a little bit more graininess here. So kind of like it's being shot on an older style film. And there's all kinds of things you can adjust for that. And if I turn it off, so if you look, you can see that graininess. If I turn it off, how it becomes more sharp. So all kinds of things you can play with. Again, all this is post-processing stuff, and that's what the post-processing volume does when you drag that in and bring it into your system. Thing I forgot to tell you with the post-processing volume is the volume itself. So is a cube, just like what we saw with the light mass importance volume. And it really only, I mean, we did see it affect the outside, and that's because of the settings I have. If you don't change the setting on it, this important setting right here, so with it selected, type in EXT. So EXT for extent, down here at the bottom, infinite extent. You want to check that. The reason being, and there's two reasons for this. So you can check it, and basically everything external to that box, to include the inside of the box and externally to the box, anything you do for post-processing will be affected in your entire world. Now, if you don't want that to happen, you extend the size of the box to be in the area that you only want those type of actions for the post-processing to occur, and they'll only occur inside the box. So that's one of the things you got to think about too with your post-processing volume. Do you want it to be a world effect, or is this something that's only going to occur in a certain area? Okay. The other thing I want to talk about real quick before I talk about how to adjust the fog color here and where I got the fog is the light mass importance volume. Now I'm going to go scale up here. The light mass importance volume is one of those things that's going to tell the system where it needs to focus the effort of the computer to render out your lighting. If you don't have that in here and it's not set large enough to cover your area, you may end up, or if it's set too large, you may end up with an error on your computer telling you that you don't have a light mass importance volume, and that's because you don't have one in there, and that's what this is. Now, to adjust it, the brush settings are over here under the details. You could scale it, but that doesn't really work as well as if you just use the brush settings. Okay, so I'm going to go up large enough so that I can cover the areas around my play area here in the X, the Y, and the Z. Okay, so I'm going to go kind of wide-ish like that to cover this entire area. And that might be too much. Maybe if I move it this way, bring it down a little bit to 22. Oh, way too small. Okay, let's try that again. Something like that. And then my Y direction, I'm going to go out and I'm going to have to readjust it. So I just wanted to cover that Coliseum area and the area right here around my... so if I hold the left mouse button down and just kind of drag it, extend the scale a little bit. Just kind of want to focus on this area like this. And we could go out a little bit further to where the end of the mountains are, but I'm going to see what it looks like that. And now the next thing we need to do is we need to get the height. We need it to be too high or too low, of course. So something like that. And the last time when I built out my lighting, I had this in here, but it was very small. And it didn't give me any type of feedback or error from it. It still built out the world the way I wanted it to, and it worked out just fine. Then, like I said, the light mass importance volume should cover your area of your world here. And when you go to build out the lighting, it will focus more effort into the area where your lighting is at and where you have the box set up. And I may want to push that box just a little bit more in that direction. All right, there we go. Okay, so again, we could build out the lighting, but the first, what I'm going to do next, though, is we're going to talk about this fog, okay? And two reasons for that. So I'm using this fog, again, to kind of cover up the way my world comes together down here at the bottom. It's a kind of a way to hide things if you don't want the player to see it too well. And I have this number of emitters down there, okay? And one of the things we can do is we can select one of the emitters and we can locate it and then open it up, okay? And right here on this emitter, so this emitter actually came from, let's go ahead and talk about that real quick. I'm all over the place, I apologize. But this this emitter is actually from, let me go ahead and right click on it. So we're going to browse to the asset, right? And right here under my Infinity Blade Icelands, this emitter came from the Icelands pack, which is located in the marketplace. If you type in Infinity Blade, all of these different assets that I've been using in this game will come up, and here's the Icelands one, and inside of it will be these emitters, okay? And you can use them like fog. In the next level, I've used them as, there's also blowing snow as well, and you'll see how that one works as well. But for this one, once we find it, we put it in there. If we need to adjust the color for it because it doesn't kind of match our world, this fog is kind of white. It's very bright and white, kind of counter to what we're seeing in the world. It does kind of provide a cool contrast, but I'm thinking that it doesn't quite work this way. So what we can do is we can go into the emitter itself, and if we select right down here our color over life, it's actually this one right up here, okay? And we can kind of play around with this color until we get the look that we want. Okay, so I'm going to pull down the green and the blue, and you can see you can get different colors. You don't have to just get red. But if I pull those down to 0, kind of zero them out, leave the red up here, I get this reddish color. I save it, go back in, and now I've got this really kind of intense red, probably more intense than it needs to be, so I'm going to go back in, move these up just a little bit. Make it not quite so intense red, and that's a little bit more purple than I want it to be. That's not too bad. It's kind of a pinkish. I got a little bit of white going into it, but I have a sort of a red tint. That will work for now. And if you wanted to totally get rid of that, you could always go back in, play around with the settings until you get the color you want for this fog, and it'll work just fine. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to jump into our exponential height fog. Okay, and the exponential height fog, again, I've actually moved it to be here in this location because its position does matter, and you can affect the world directly from where the emitter is located, or the exponential height fog control is located. So I put it here underneath this world. Right now I have everything kind of toned down so you can't really see it. One of the things we can do is we can play around with the in-scattering tint texture, and we'll play with that in a second. But we can start kind of dialing some things up. Okay, and actually I want the fall off to be a bit further out. And we start to kind of hide some of those hard edges. We can see that the ground's all the way down here. That may be something we want to leave. And then you can play around with some of the density, make it a little bit more dense. Play around with the fall off as well. Until you kind of get the look that you want. Now, one thing to remember is, again, position on it matters, but it also does kind of affect your game a little bit. And we'll probably end up with a little bit of fog in here as well. It just depends on your settings. And it looks like I kind of lost the sun in the process of doing all this, so I may need to back off a little bit on some of these, like the density. Okay. All right, again, we can also play around with the color. I actually got to get that down here. That's the wrong one. Here it is. All right, and you can see how we can start to kind of color code everything to be in the similar color ranges. All right. So those are the biggest things for all of the lighting systems. And the next thing, once you finally kind of get everything set to the way you think you want it, make sure you go back up, you save everything, and then you go ahead and do out another build. Again, probably leave it at the preview until you're happy with the way everything looks. And again, I'm going to go ahead and pause until this is done. Okay, and so we're done. Get the same errors again. This time I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go all the way back to my beginning. So I'm going to go to my default player position. I want to check out how everything looks as we are kind of running through it. Turn the volume down a little bit, hopefully. Okay, seems that it moved from my speaker. All right, sorry about that. Bad speaker control. So let's go ahead and hit play. All right, so we want to check to make sure that the mood and everything that we want it and the way it's set is throughout the entire game. Seeing how the light looks, how the play is, any of the things that players need to be able to see. That was kind of light, so we need to come back and fix that. Play through your game. Make sure you're always constantly playing through, checking things out. Okay. Seeing what the game looks like, how the feel is. Are you conveying the mood? Is it too difficult? Are there light gaps? Are there issues with your lights? One of the things about rotating the sun is on some of these large scale models, these meshes, they don't have a backside, so the sun will flow right through them. So you may need to put up some blocker panels. You may need to go in and maybe make them select the double side mesh inside the settings. So those are some things that you might need to consider as you're starting to play around with your lighting. Okay, and are you achieving the overall look and feel that you want? Are your any of your HUD, are all of the words able to be read? Is it clear, concise? Does it clash when you change your light colors? Those type of things, okay? So now let's go ahead and jump over real quick before I finish this up and just take a look at level 2. In this level, I did change out the sky sphere, as I had said, and use a lot of the snow fog in here, but you can see by changing out the sky sphere, this particular world now takes on a different feel. Played with the lighting to try to get it so that it felt like it was a cold ice world, and changed the coloring of the lights to kind of a bluish color. Now, when you are using lights like this, be careful because you can easily get to a point where your frames per second drops down drastically. And if you want to know what that is, go up to the little hamburger up here, this little 3 dot lines right here, show FPS, and you can see your FPS popping up over here. Okay. And you want to make sure that you're staying in the green, the bare minimum, so above 30 or 40 frames per second, at least. If not faster for most of the game, so that the game remains smooth. Okay, yeah, so those are kind of like some of the things I said. So if we take a look at this skybox here, again, let me get above the fog. I click on it, and we go to browse the assets. This particular one came out of what's called the Elite Landscapes, and that is something that you can also find in the marketplace. Okay, and I think this is the Landscape Bundle Pack, maybe. It was a free asset at the time. Might not be free anymore. All right, so there may be some free ones still. I'm hoping that there are. I have to go dig around for it. Let's just do the search here. All right, well, so this is where that landscape, or that one came from, was from the Elite Landscapes. It was the Alien World. Unfortunately, they may not be free anymore. Not sure if that is the case anymore. But there are other, I'm sure, other skyboxes in here that you can find. And why is my mouse? Oh, here we go. Good Sky. This is another one that you can download. There's different types of world maps and things like that as well. And this one also has weather, so that's kind of a cool thing too if you're wanting to get weather. All right. I think that's it for this video this time. If you have any questions, please put them down in the comments section. If you liked the video, please make sure you like it. And also subscribe to Putting on the Fritz 3D Visualization. I'll see you next time.